peptides are everywhere. And if you've been on the internet, you've probably seen them and you might be wondering, are they safe? Is this all hype? Is there really something behind these? And so today I'm talking with Dr. Jeff Gross of Recellebrate to talk all about peptides. We also talk about stem cells and exosomes as well, and really how these can be used to support our longevity, to support our well-being in a very safe, effective way. We touch on the approval and get into the kind of the backstory of them too. So if you've been curious about the safety, the sourcing, all of that, we absolutely go into that. And I really appreciate Dr. Jeff's approach to how you can look at these in the big picture, add these to your, your way of supporting your health. And he really breaks it down in a very simple, real, and honestly funny way. So it's a really great listen. Please, if you have questions after listening to this about peptides, about how to approach these, feel free to reach out because I'm always happy to help, understand how something could maybe be used for your health, the concerns that you have. Dr. Jeff, thank you so much for being with me today.
It's my pleasure. Great to meet you and your audience.
Yeah. So to kind of set the stage, I'd love to hear, your path going from neurosurgery to, regenerative medicine, longevity medicine. What brought you there?
Yeah, it was a little bit of a happy accident. I'm a spine fellowship trained neurosurgeon. I took care of neck and back problems for, almost 30 years. And I did everything from non-surgical care to surgical care, always focusing first on non-surgical, trying not to do surgery. The best surgeons try not to do surgery. And, my patients brought this to me. I would have a lot of patients in this gap where the non-surgical treatments were inadequate to fully mitigate their pain and problems, but they weren't ready for surgery, which was next on the menu. So they would say, well, gee, I still have these pains and I don't want surgery yet. I'm not that bad. I said, okay, good. And they'd say, how about this? How about that? How about crystals? How about, ayahuasca? How about stem cells? And, chance favors the prepared mind. And I have undergraduate background in cellular biology. And that was a long time ago. Yeah, I said, and it was on my radar that professional athletes were leaving the country to get stem cells, 20 years ago. Okay, there's something about this, and we're not trained on it here in the US. So about 8-9 years ago, instead of going to the annual neurosurgery conference where the bow tie wearing knuckleheads are patting themselves on the back for doing the same thing over and over for 60 years, I went to a stem cell conference. I put down the Kool-Aid. I went to the stem cell conference, and it blew my mind what had happened in the 20 some years, or maybe 30 years since I got my undergraduate degree. So I said, oh, I'd love to add this as a tool, right? It's a new tool to help those patients who didn't want surgery, but, wanted something. So I dove in. I said, okay, what are the best practices? What's the best stuff you can use? How you do this? And it changed my entire practice within 1 to 2 years. Even though I still see some spine patients, surgery is even further away for most of my people that see me, right? We have all kinds of biologic solutions for them, and peptides are one of those. So, and you can't do spine and not offer knees and ankles and shoulders and longevity and IV and autoimmune and hormones. So I'm a whole new version 2.0 of professional medical practice.
Amazing. Well, I love that you saw that gap in your patients and didn't just ignore it. You really dove into it to best serve your patients. And I think that's so incredible when we can expand that menu, so to speak, and really be able to offer so many more things and be able to push off surgery even farther. That's always a huge win. That's fantastic.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, speaking of peptides, it's a hot topic nowadays. And I think, they're everywhere. And maybe to start, why do you think that they are so popular now? Why are they really emerging so strongly lately?
Well, a few things I think come to mind. First, the GLP-1 weight loss based peptide medications have really opened up the therapeutic benefit, the democratization of self-injection at home. Like, it's not taboo anymore. You don't have to be just a diabetic taking insulin by injection, right? These are all kinds. So that was a big one. Number two is people have distrust in the government slash big pharma. And I put those together because they're so intimate. So, we've seen what happened with the whole COVID fiasco and, did we do harm? And I say we, and I shouldn't take credit for harm because I wasn't involved in that. But the medical community, how we just, drones and Kool-Aid drinking, just, what do you want us to do? Give that injection. So, I think people are starting to say, maybe we should pay attention to what we put in our bodies a little more. And I think there is a third, a democratization. People want to make their own choices. And, if they do something that's very different than what the government tells them to do, from this quote unquote FDA approved, and I'd love to get into that if you'll allow, advantage versus not, I think people are like, I think I'd like to do something different. So maybe we'll look into this. So I think it's kind of special. And you have Kardashians and social media is giving it a lift. I think those are the main reasons.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I was going to go there next. There is a big difference or a big spread between the online community and what the conversation is around peptides. And then, maybe the safety data and the FDA approval and all of that. So can you speak a little bit more to that?
Oh, totally. How much time you got? So let's first unpack the meaning of what FDA approved is, because we throw around those words and a lot of people, even doctors that just don't think anymore after residency, they think FDA approved is that's all we can do. That's absolute bunk. It's ridiculous. Most of what doctors do isn't approved by the FDA. FDA approves marketing claims. I'll say that again, marketing claims. They were set up by Congress to protect consumers from false claims. They only approve marketing claims for drugs and devices in the medical realm. Okay, so stem cells, exosomes, most peptides are not approved for marketing claims. That doesn't mean you can't have them. It doesn't mean they're not potentially good for you. It doesn't mean there aren't good studies or medical evidence for them. So, Dr. Miranda, if you were vitamin D deficient and you went to see your doctor and doctor said, hey, this is a great anti-aging hormone, vitamin, you should really take some. I want to get your vitamin D levels up. And you'd say, great, I'll go get some vitamin D. I'll take the vitamin D. That's a no-brainer, right? Not FDA approved. If you are dehydrated because it's hot, you're dehydrated and you overdid it exercising, you're like, oh, I'm a miserable, and someone takes you to the urgent care, they're going to give you IV fluids, not FDA approved, but you're going to get them. Of course, you're going to get them. So this whole thing of hanging your hat on FDA approved is silly on 2 points. One is it has nothing to do with regulating the practice of medicine or chiropractic or naturopathic or functional medicine. It has nothing to do with that. It has nothing to do with what doctors do for you on a day-to-day basis, except when they make a claim or perpetuate a claim. So if you came to me and you said, hey, my knee's bad, I'm trying not to have a knee replacement, what can you do with exosomes to help my knee? I would be super transparent and clear and say, I cannot make any claims that I can cure or treat that disease or condition. But here are some things I can give you that might help your body heal you. So it's all about the claim. So FDA approved doesn't mean something's unapproved if it's not yet approved or disapproved. It's just like it says on the vitamin bottle. FDA has not evaluated this. And in Europe, they might have approved it by their FDA-like organization. Why? There's medical evidence for this stuff. Most of that evidence comes from Europe and Asia. They are 2 decades ahead of us. We are way behind. That's the whole FDA-approved piece.
I appreciate you breaking that down. So I think, again, a lot of doctors probably don't understand that
No,
fully.
That
Because
Kool-Aid,
we're just sort of told, we're taught guidelines, we're taught, okay, memorize this, know, how to stay in your realm. And it's scary to go outside of what is approved, what's, been told to us to, recommend. So yeah. And I think absolutely the, average person, I think doesn't understand that too, and can misinterpret that as it's unsafe.
Disinformation. It's absolute disinformation. I think the phrase FDA approved should be completely said FDA approved for marketing claims. Oh, every time you use that phrase FDA approved for marketing claims should always follow.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's such a big difference between what can actually help and what, research is actually showing and all of that. Which on that front, what is the evidence then that we have for peptides and maybe these other things if you want to get into like the stem cells and exosomes as well? Kind of like what are even if we can't make claims around them, what is
Right.
the evidence showing for these things and
Yeah.
their benefits?
Yeah. Well, and I can show people medical evidence, published literature. I can show them anecdotal results, like here's a before and after MRI. I can do that all day long because that's legitimate. And the doctrine of informed consent requires us as clinicians to give everybody all options. Like, okay, you can have knee surgery. We could do a knee injection with this. We could do a knee injection with that. You could do nothing. You could, use crystals or prayer or whatever you want to use. Those are all options. But there is evidence on many peptides. Let's keep it to peptides for the moment. There's varying amounts of evidence. What we don't have in most of them are those 10,000 person large randomized placebo-controlled study. Why? Big Pharma cannot patent a naturally occurring molecule. And the vast majority of peptides are natural. We make them. We're making them right now. Sometimes we need more, but we're making them. And because they can't patent it, they're not going to put $50 million behind a big study like they did for their GLPs. GLP-1s are naturally occurring, but they modified it to make it patentable. And that's why retatrutide is $1 trillion GLP.
Wow. Yeah. And again, I think people don't understand that piece of the money that goes behind some of those studies. So there is good evidence for these things being helpful, but they just don't have those.
To varying degrees. We have dose escalation studies on most of them. We have safety data on most of them. Some of them, no. So, I do some very esoteric peptides for different reasons. And some of them have very little data. But when you have a patient with cancer and they're trying everything natural, maybe they don't want to have chemotherapy or radiation, or maybe they want to add natural things on top of that. Some of those don't have a lot of data, but they have enough where, hey, do you want to try this? There's a right to try in this country. It's a personal choice. It's part of the informed consent doctrine.
Yeah. And that's such an important point in my mind to highlight that it's the person's choice. So if they are informed well of the pros and cons, the risks and benefits, then it's up to them of, what they want to try or not. I think that's, again, part of that menu to just know what options they have available to them.
Yeah. It's our duty to share that. And if your clinician hasn't opened their mind, I mean, gosh, even me, 10 or 15 years ago, and I wasn't offering stem cells, I was doing a disservice to my patients. I didn't know that at the time, right? But informed consent calls for it.
Yeah. And with that, I'd love to hear maybe what some of your favorite peptides are that you're using really regularly, the kind of the results that you're seeing, maybe particularly in women.
Yeah. So GLPs are still my favorite. We have 3 generations of GLPs now. The first one was called semaglutide, the generic. I won't use brand names. It has one mechanism of action, very effective. The second one is called tirzepatide, 2 mechanisms, more effective when they were compared head to head. And the third one, which will be released for FDA approval soon. The only reason it hasn't been released because the same company owns the tirzepatide, owns retatrutide, and they want to milk every dollar out of tirzepatide before they let you have the better one. Retatrutide has 3 mechanisms, and that's the one I take personally. And I'm not taking it for weight loss. I'm taking it for reducing inflammation, longevity, and all the other long-term health benefits we're starting to see come out of these GLPs. And I love not being hungry all the time. I love not wanting to snack at, bedtime. I love, how it tempers my food noise and all kinds of things. My HbA1c is down to 5.0. Not that I had an issue beforehand. It's nice to know you have a longevity marker like HbA1c that you can drive down with that peptide.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's my number one, even if you don't need to lose fat. And then people on GLPs, we have to watch them. They tend to lose, they have 2 side effects of losing weight. One, they can lose some muscle, which we don't want. They can get saggy skin. Let's go to the muscle first. So with muscle loss, you lose volume. You could lose it in your face. You pay the skinny tax and you could get more wrinkling. And it takes 1 to 2 years for your collagen and elastin to catch up, especially if you're in your 40s or beyond, or if you fall off the hormone cliff and don't optimize slash replace with bioidentical hormones, especially, both sexes, but the female crowd, that's more abrupt for them. Sorry, ladies, it is. And we got to get ahead of that. The earlier you get on that in the premenopause, perimenopausal state, the better you will do with longevity. The longer you have periods, I'm sorry, the longer you will live. So if you want a longevity plan, we know that. It's a no-brainer. So with muscle is a longevity organ. You have to push muscle mass, and muscle mass and bone density go together. I know you had someone on talking about bone density, and those are, both of those things are correlated with longevity. If you're 70, you have good bone density and good muscle mass, you have more longevity compared to the usual life expectancy. So you got to support those. So it's got to be weight-bearing exercise, hormone optimization, protein, good protein, enough protein. None of us really, I mean, I have to work hard at that. Everyone does. Protein, protein, protein. And then we have these strategies and peptides. There are muscle gaining peptides through the growth hormone axis, where we can stimulate more growth hormone release. You're not going to grow unless you take crazy amounts. You stimulate the growth pathways from muscle gain. You get more out of your workout as long as you have the protein and the stimulus of the workout. So you got to do resistance training for that, and you got to work to failure. They work hard. So we help people tweak their workouts. Instead of that 3 sets of 10, we're now advocating one crazy burnout set to failure, or blood flow restriction bands, Katsu bands, things like that to really that failure. When your muscles work to failure, they release their own peptides called exerkines or myokines that stimulate the brain and the body and the muscles. And that's why exercise reduces the incidence of Alzheimer's. Those peptides, the muscles will keep you young. Okay, so those might be tesamorelin, ipamorelin, CJC-1295 peptides. And if someone's on a GLP weight loss program, we will not just watch their weight, we will watch their body composition, get them on a body composition scale, how much lean mass, how much fat percentage, because as they lose fat, if their muscles start to go down, well, we better add a little peptide there to get that up, because we want to maintain. Plus, you're going to look and feel so much better when you have muscle tone. And I'm probably one of the best shapes of my life right now at 60, in part because of that. So you use these. And then the skin. So this is emerging. This is one of the first podcasts I get to talk about this. Is, of course, we knew that GHK-Cu, the copper peptide, was good for skin. We can use it topically. We can use it micro-injected or micro-needled. But recently, and we can use it internally. It's incredibly anti-inflammatory, and it's a longevity peptide. But we are now seeing some studies where people are micro-injecting or micro-needling it or micro-radiofrequencing it to help stimulate some elastin, which helps shrink the skin back to the size of the body. So you don't feel like you're wearing an extra size skin suit on a skinnier frame. So that is new emerging, where you might do like a microneedle to the face with copper and might do it injected as well. So that's the copper peptide. And it could be part of a stack. It could be part of a combo that has other anti-inflammatory / longevity peptides. The code here for longevity is anti-inflammatory. Things that suppress inflammatory, degenerative, aging cascades in the cells. So that could be GLOW or CLO that have that in there.
Amazing. That is so helpful, I think, for people to hear, like, wow, okay, here's how we're actually using them. Here's how we can, the things that deter people and scare people away. It's like, no, we have a plan for that. It's not just you lose all your muscle mass and then you're worse off from where you started. I mean, that is the way a lot of conventional doctors might approach it, but that isn't the way that it has to be done. And it can be done in a very safe, effective way that's with that big picture mindset of what's our ultimate goal, that longevity piece, that, long health span where we're feeling great into our hundreds or wherever we want to land.
Yeah, stars, let's do it. It's doable. You got to start early and do plenty of small interventions, build consistency, and you can do that. You can live well into your hundreds independently and healthy, not nursing home hundreds.
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate that you mentioned too the hormone piece for women, because that is a big cliff that it can feel like a big cliff falling off with those hormones, and suddenly we're having this, much more rapid aging process happening. So I appreciate you mentioning that as part of it, because it really is that big picture, full expansive approach to things.
Yeah, we look at people before we start like a GLP, is there anything that's going to stall their weight loss? What's their hormone status? Thyroid hormone, sex hormones. We look at some other labs and things. We want to treat everyone as an individual and cautiously. So I know there are these, online through your phone, you can sign up for GLPs and some medical oversight AI will just approve them. But we have some people that have side effect problems. If you don't stay ahead of your GI tract, got to keep it moving. We have strategies for that. I mean, these really should be medically supervised, coached at least, so that you have the education to do them safely and successfully.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Not this, there are a lot that are direct to consumer now, but that's where I get a little nervous. Where I'm like, I don't know where they're getting them from, what the oversight is, if any. So yeah. And with that, maybe we speak to kind of like the sourcing of some of this. It's another question that I get from people. Where are they coming from? Can you speak to that?
Absolutely. So there are two sources. Well, maybe let's call it three sources of where you can get peptides, and we direct people to good sources. So we'll start at the bottom. Temu. Do not get your peptides from Temu. So the irony here is that peptides are made synthetically to match the natural ones in our body. So most of the peptides are from these great big labs, these synthesizer labs in India, and they're made on a resin. And those resins are shipped to these big pharmacy labs in China where they bulk, cleanse them, cleanse them, powder them into we call lyophilized, kind of a powdered form. And then you get this white kind of powder in a little vial. As far as I know, they all come from China. So when American importers, the big suppliers, bring them here, they have to have them tested by batch. And that testing is a third party, a different group, and they test it for purity, meaning if this has BPC 157, make sure it has BPC 157 and it has to be 99% or better pure. Okay. Make sure it doesn't have toxins, heavy metals, and things that shouldn't have in there that could be from the cleansing process or maybe something nefarious, right? The Chinese want to take out a bunch of them. So that is done. They also test for bacterial involvement through what's called endotoxin. So that all has to be done. Then the supplier can send it out to these hundreds and hundreds of peptide companies you see online. Okay. So and then they share that certificate of analysis from that testing. And as long as you have a certificate of analysis that matches the batch, that is as safe as it gets. That's called pharmaceutical grade. So the other path is a pharmacy, a 503 pharmacy, which is called a compounding pharmacy. They get the same, they have to do their own additional testing, which you may or may not care about. It's just double testing. And to do that, that doesn't mean these, what we call research use only suppliers are wrong. Just make sure, and we know some good ones that we vetted, that they have the tested same material that the pharmacy has. That's pharmaceutical grade. And they're not a pharmacy, so they have to put research use only on the bottle or not for human. Even though it's the same powder that'll go to the pharmacy and they'll put clinical use only. It's the same stuff. So we know where to get it safely. The stuff I use, my family uses, my patients order from these places, and that's how you get them. And that's how we're going to continue to get them, because Big Pharma doesn't have a solution to these naturally occurring peptides, only the GLPs that they patented.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think that will put a lot of people at ease, or at least let them understand that that's how they're all being made, and that's how they're kind of all the same to a degree. And that third-party testing, I think, is a really important piece to make sure that that's being done.
And ironically, Big Pharma makes drugs the same way. They have it tested. Your drug, drug from a pharmacy is no different than how these are handled, as long as you have that testing data, that certificate. And most of them are online now. They send you a QR code, or you look at it when you order it. You can download it if you want, but they used to send it with each one. Now they just have it available.
Yeah, great. And what would you say with that? Like, are there misconceptions or myths that you hear that we haven't touched on? I think the FDA approval and the sourcing and all of that are big ones. Anything else that you feel like you hear a lot that you have to clear up?
Absolutely. So peptides are not a replacement for good, healthy living, good doctoring, diet, exercise, sleep, nutrition, mindset, all that stuff has to be part of this first. Number two, they're not magic, although they can have some fantastic results that you've never achieved. We have some crazy stories of success. Then I have people that take some peptides, don't feel anything. So like anything, it's going to help a lot of people in my view, but not everybody. So that might not be the right one, or you may need something else. So there's some other pathway. And we have to study that at the cellular pathway level. It might include lab tests. It might, not. So, and then not all people respond the same dose by dose. I give Wolverine recovery peptides for an ankle strain to one person, and the other person needs 8 times the dose. That's okay. That's what professional athletes are doing, by the way. They're all, using these significantly behind the scenes.
Yeah. And I just kind of a question on a side for that. Are they allowed? Because that's another piece of the things, right? Like, especially professional athletes, they're regulated with what they're allowed to use. Is that one of those
Well, it's
allowable things?
some of the amateur groups, and one of them is called WADA, says you're not supposed to use most of them, but they can never detect them. And they're not, in my mind, they're not performance enhancing. They are body health and wellness, which athletes can do in other ways too, right? They could take an anti-inflammatory, although that has downside on the chronic use. They could do a hot sauna. They could do a cold plunge. That's just as performance enhancing. They could fast, do a 24-hour or 72-hour fast, which, can reboot you. So they're not supposed to, most of them, but there's no way to detect these. They're naturally occurring in your body. Of course you have them.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And with this, you kind of mentioned how, especially initially, how they came into your practice, kind of like filling in this big gap and now, kind of blown up to, have all these different approaches. I'm curious too to see where, to maybe touch on the stem cells and the exosomes of how they kind of fit together and when maybe you'd use one versus another.
So I'll give you a quick 101. So this is a great place to kind of put it. All of this falls under the heading of what we call cell signaling. So our cells accumulate inflammation, degeneration, deterioration, and we call that aging through the inflammatory process. Anything we can do to signal to our cells to stop goofing around and get back to optimal mode / anti-inflammatory mode is what we want. That supports longevity and healing and all and works against disease formation, works against aging. So the two main ways to do that are naturally, which would be all the good, healthy living we just talked about, diets, proper restorative sleep, nutrition, supplementation, exercise, strategic exercise, mindset, reducing stress, and hormesis, which is a little bit of body stress to build adaptability and resilience at the cellular level so you can handle stuff. And that might be hot sauna, cold plunge, fasting, high intensity exercise, low oxygen, temporary, So those things are called hormesis. And, you see people now doing them for longevity all the way up through what we call biohacking, which is we really like, I'm a biohacker. We try stuff and, I have a long list of things I do every day. And I look back like, wow, those are biohacking things I've added one at a time. And now it's just normal for me. And then we have what we'll call the supercharged optimization cell signaling. It'll be peptides and regenerative biologics, which are stem cells and their progeny. So we now know that stem cells have an amazing ability to really tell our cells how to suppress inflammation and get back to what they're supposed to be doing. Cartilage cells building cartilage, brain cells, not being inflamed. It can work your computer can work faster, that kind of thing. So we use stem cell type things for that. We now know stem cells aren't doing that. They are delivering that. So if I gave you stem cells, if you came to my clinic in Vegas, I gave you some IV stem cells, which we're really not even doing anymore, they'd be out of your system in 2 days. But the benefits would last longer, and some of those benefits would be permanent. Why? Because those stem cells have released 2 things. One, a group of growth factors / proteins / peptides, which are small proteins, back to the peptides, or small vesicles. Cells are small. These are even smaller vesicles that are measured in nanometers across. Some people call these nanoparticles. They are called exosomes. Okay. And the exosomes carry a message that are taken in by our cells, just like those growth factors of peptides are taken in by our cells. And they deliver this incredibly youthful, restorative, rejuvenating, regenerative message to our cells. That's cell signaling 101 right there. So we have gotten away from the stem cells. We've cut out the middleman. We go right to the exosomes. Why? They travel through tissue better. They are less expensive, and they get the job done in a more efficient and logical way.
Amazing. And where would you use maybe exosomes versus peptides then with certain things? Are there
Well,
what where you'd be like, yes, I'd absolutely start with this first versus another?
so I started this from the musculoskeletal recovery side of things, and I do a lot of joint and spine injections with exosomes. But some of those people, if it's a mild problem at first, we might just start with peptides. Peptides are way less expensive compared to regenerative biologics. So we might start with that. Sometimes we'll do them together where you do the peptides for a few months surrounding a joint injection with exosomes, seeking to regenerate that cartilage, which is a 6 to 12 month process, but the peptides can help suppress the inflammation. And actually, there are even cartilage stimulating peptides. There's one called Cartilax that we use, usually in conjunction with a Wolverine BPC 157 TB 500 combo. So, and I'm just giving you the basic level. I mean, I could tell you about 20 other peptides that are very esoteric, but that's a very standard thing that I would do. We would stack them together for the most optimal benefit.
Amazing. Yeah, I appreciate that. I think like does again give people an idea of what the menu might look like and know that there's more beyond that if they need that. But I think for most people, that's a really good starting point to just know, okay, even a stack of a few isn't a scary thing necessarily. That's great. And they can work well together to really boost those effects.
Yeah, just so everyone knows, GLPs are typically weekly. Most of these others are daily, but some of them we cycle on and off. Maybe you do a month on, month off. We have some for longevity that you might do for a month every 6 months. You do so twice a year for a month. There are, a lot of them, and some of them come in already mixed together. So one injection gives you 3 or 4 different peptides, which is a more convenient way. And a lot of you see people online saying, oh, you can't take these together. Yes, you can. They go right into the same body at the same pH. They're fine. There are some I wouldn't do together, but we keep those separate.
Yeah, great. And maybe for the person who is listening to this and thinking, okay, I need to get my hands on something like this. I want to try something. Where's a good starting point for people to approach this?
Well, do your homework. Make sure you're doing the basics first. Do all the longevity, everything your grandmother told you to do it. And then, if you're interested in peptides, you find a clinician that does peptides. We do it by telehealth. It doesn't have to be me, but I love talking peptides. I talk about peptides all day long now. Most of my new patients every day we see new patients, most of them by telehealth from different parts of the world or the States, are either seeing me for peptides or some type of joint or spine or regenerative medicine application. And we have many we didn't scratch on here, but that's where we start. And we dial in. Are you healthy? Do you need labs? Do we need to see where you've been so we know where we're going? Do we need to script it out for you? And we dial it in at a granular level for you, the individual.
Yeah, great. And is there one maybe like final big picture,
Wow.
takeaway that you'd like to leave people? It doesn't have to be grand.
Yes, totally. Yeah, I know. I like when you put me on the spot. This is good. So don't take no for an answer. If you think there's something that can help you in this realm and your MD or your nurse practitioner, your PA says, no, that's not approved. That's not, that means that doctor, that person has not opened their mind yet and hasn't put down the Kool-Aid like me. Not that I'm right on everything, just ask my wife. But I can tell you that there are options. You have to keep seeking them, find the right people, and find the person or the clinician that works best with you, that might be more open-minded if you are open-minded, if you want to seek these things. And some people don't. Some people have grown up with the authority that whatever my doctor says, whatever the government is approving, whatever the health insurance says, that's the right thing. And that's fine if that's you. I'm not here to twist any arms. I'm here because people have an appetite for natural health, wellness, and longevity that doesn't come from drugs and surgery.
Yeah. I think that's a great here takeaway, because I agree with that too. I think across the board, people want more from their health and they want a hand in their own health. And they're tired of just being told, like, no, no, it's not safe. Hormones too, again, to go back to that. So many women
Yeah.
have to turn away, they cause cancer. It's like, do your research, know what you're doing, and find the person who is right for you, because there are so many incredible clinicians out there who actually do the research and know what they're doing and are willing to, approach things with a much more open mind.
Question authority, even your
Yeah.
doctor.
Well, where can people find you? You mentioned you're in Las Vegas. Can you tell us a little
Yeah.
bit more about where people can?
We're everywhere. So we changed our practice name about 8 years ago to Recellebrate, because you're celebrating the renewal of your cells. So we made up that word and we pretty much cornered the internet on that word. So it's Recellebrate. You can look at us on social media at Recellebrate, recellebrate.com. What I'm talking to you about today is just scratching the surface of what we do and what we have. So feel free to reach out. If you mention Dr. Miranda when you reach out, we will be happy to do initial peptide consultation for free because you listen to Dr. Miranda, but you have to mention Dr. Miranda.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate that. And thank you so much for sharing this information. It was a very real conversation that you had that I think a lot of people don't get. And so I really appreciate that.
I'm happy to do it anytime.